It was an unusually chilly morning in the city, and the air was thick with an undercurrent of anticipation. People were bustling around, going about their usual business, but something in the air felt different, almost electric. Whispers began to circulate like wildfire, building from person to person, that a high-profile figure was about to visit one of the most exclusive watch boutiques in the city. Elon Musk, a name that had come to represent not just innovation and technological marvel, but also controversy, was on his way. The boutique, an establishment known for its exquisite collection of rare, meticulously crafted timepieces, had built its reputation on catering to only the wealthiest and most discerning clientele. It was a place of sophistication, where the subtle clink of a Rolex or the gleam of a Patek Philippe was a statement of taste, success, and a certain kind of quiet power. But today, it was about to be turned upside down. As the clock on the wall ticked down, signaling the moment of his arrival, the store's staff began to prepare themselves mentally for the inevitable. Little did they know, this was not going to be a simple transaction. The bell above the door rang as Musk walked into the boutique. His figure, towering and commanding, filled the doorway. But it wasn't just his physical presence that stopped everyone in their tracks. It was the bold, unapologetic red MAGA hat perched on his head. It wasn't just a piece of headgear. It was a symbol, one that evoked mixed reactions wherever he went. To some, it was a bold declaration of independence and defiance. To others, it was a controversial, divisive emblem of everything they stood against. The moment he stepped inside, the room seemed to freeze. Conversations halted, and eyes turned, some with curiosity, others with judgment. There was no subtlety in his entrance. The staff, caught off guard by the juxtaposition of Musk's groundbreaking success and his politically charged attire, tried their best to compose themselves, but the unease was palpable. Some whispered behind their hands, exchanging shocked looks, while others pretended to browse the displays, avoiding direct eye contact with the billionaire. It wasn't that they hadn't seen wealth before. After all, this boutique catered to the ultra-rich. But the tension surrounding Musk's arrival was different, somehow more intense. He wasn't just a man walking into a store. He was a lightning rod for opinions, a walking contradiction in a world that valued harmony and exclusivity above all else. His hat seemed to scream louder than anything else in the room. Olivia, a young saleswoman known for her poise under pressure, was immediately assigned to Musk. She had seen her fair share of eccentric clients, but there was something about him that made her heart race. The red MAGA hat wasn't just a fashion choice. It was a political statement, one that had become synonymous with division and controversy. Olivia had been trained to handle high-profile clients, to smile through awkward moments, and to steer any situation towards a successful sale. But this was different. Musk was known for his bluntness, his unfiltered opinions, and his uncanny ability to stir up trouble with a single comment. Her training had never prepared her for this kind of encounter. As she approached him, her nerves flared. She put on the most professional smile she could muster, her voice slightly shaky as she greeted him. "Good morning, sir. How can I assist you today?" The words were rehearsed, but her voice carried a trace of uncertainty that she hoped Musk didn't notice. She wanted to remain calm, to keep her professionalism intact, but inside she could feel the tension gnawing at her. The entire store seemed to hold its breath, waiting for the first crack in the facade of civility that would undoubtedly come. Musk, ever the enigmatic figure, didn't answer her immediately. His eyes scanned the room, taking in the gleaming display cases, the polished wooden floors, and the sharp, almost sterile ambience that seemed to exude wealth and exclusivity. He seemed to be detached, almost as if he were evaluating the store from a distance rather than actually engaging with it. His gaze lingered on the watches, not with the excitement of a customer ready to make a purchase, but with the cool detachment of someone who had seen it all before. It wasn't just about the watches. It was about the game, the performance, the spectacle. After a long pause, Musk finally turned his head toward Olivia, his lips curling into a smirk that was equal parts arrogance and amusement. He didn't give the impression of someone who needed a watch. He gave the impression of someone who already owned the entire collection. "I'm here to buy a watch," he said, his tone flat, almost dismissive. It was as though the visit were an afterthought, a minor task to check off on a list of other, far more important business dealings. Olivia's heart skipped a beat. Was this a joke? Was he actually serious? Musk's presence loomed large in the room, but his demeanor was casual, almost nonchalant, like he was just another guy looking to spend money. His words rang hollow in a place so focused on luxury and status. He didn't care about fitting in, about conforming to the unspoken rules of high society. He was here for his own reasons, and he made it abundantly clear that he was above the subtlety of social expectations. Olivia, taking a deep breath to steady herself, nodded and gestured for Musk to follow her to the back of the store. She was determined to stay composed, to maintain a professional distance, but it was hard to ignore the undercurrent of tension that had already begun to swirl in the room. As she walked, she could feel the eyes of the other customers boring into her, their stares filled with judgment, curiosity, and even disdain. They were used to dealing with the rich, the famous, the powerful, but they had never dealt with anyone like Musk. The sight of him in the red MAGA hat, standing in a room full of priceless watches, felt jarring. It was as though the world of luxury had collided with the world of politics in a way that no one could have predicted. There was a subtle shift in the energy of the store as Musk's footsteps echoed through the space. People tried to pretend they weren't watching, but they couldn't help themselves. His very presence had disrupted the equilibrium of the boutique, and they were all too aware of it. Musk was a symbol, a walking contradiction, and for those who had come to see high-end watches as a reflection of a cultured, polished lifestyle, he was a challenge, a provocation. When they reached the back of the store, Olivia showed Musk the exclusive models that had been placed in the private section for clients who were willing to spend without question. These were the rarest of the rare, the pieces that could only be acquired with an unspoken understanding of wealth and taste. But as Musk examined the collection, his eyes glazed over as if none of it mattered. He wasn't interested in the watches the way most customers would be. He wasn't admiring the intricate design or the craftsmanship. He was simply inspecting them as one might examine a commodity, detached from the artistry that went into creating them. Then his gaze locked onto one particular piece, a platinum timepiece that seemed to shimmer under the soft lighting. It was understated yet undeniably luxurious, the kind of watch that didn't need to scream for attention because its worth was implied. It was everything Musk might have wanted in a watch: sleek, modern, elegant, but not ostentatious. Yet, instead of showing excitement or interest, Musk remained stoic. He didn't express admiration for the piece, and that unsettled Olivia. Was he going to buy something? Or was this just another performance, another way to make a statement? Before she could ask if he was ready to make a selection, the atmosphere in the store took a sudden, dramatic shift. A man, an older gentleman dressed in a sharply tailored suit, could no longer hold his tongue. He had been watching Musk from the moment he walked in, and now he had reached his breaking point. "Are you seriously going to let this guy buy a watch here?" The man blurted out, his voice raised and dripping with disdain. "Look at him. The hat, the arrogance, it's disgusting." The words stung, sharp and cutting, and they echoed throughout the boutique. Olivia froze. She wasn't sure what to do. She had been trained to handle difficult clients, but this wasn't just any confrontation. This was political. It was ideological. It was personal. The tension in the room escalated rapidly as the man's outburst set off a chain reaction. Musk turned slowly, his expression unreadable, his gaze locking onto the older man with the cold precision of someone who had faced public confrontation many times before. Musk didn't flinch. He didn't recoil. Instead, he stared at the man, unblinking, before speaking in a voice that was deliberately slow and deliberate. "Excuse me?" he asked, his tone ice cold. The older man, now emboldened by the audience around him, squared his shoulders, and stepped forward. "You heard me," he said, his words thick with contempt. "You come in here wearing that hat, promoting that divisive, hateful rhetoric, and expect us to just treat you like any other customer. You're a disgrace, and you don't belong in a place like this." The insult was direct, personal, and venomous. Olivia's heart raced. She could feel her cheeks flush with embarrassment, but she wasn't sure where to look. The eyes of the customers around her were all trained on the scene unfolding in front of her. The tension in the boutique was so thick it felt as though the air itself was holding its breath. It was like a perfect storm was brewing, and Olivia was standing at the center of it. Torn between the professionalism she had been trained to uphold and the unspoken conflict that was escalating right before her eyes. Musk, however, didn't back down. His expression remained unreadable as he tilted his head slightly, his gaze never wavering from the older man. His silence, which stretched on for a moment too long, was unsettling. It was as though he was deciding whether to engage in the battle of words or to let the man's insults roll off him like water off a duck's back. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, Musk broke the silence, his voice low and steady, but filled with an undeniable intensity. "You don't know me," he said, each word laced with a calm venom that contrasted sharply with the older man's outburst. "You don't know my values, my work, or what I stand for. And yet here you are, trying to define me by a hat, a symbol that has nothing to do with who I really am. It's easy to make assumptions, to judge someone based on their appearance, but it's much harder to understand the complexities of a person. But that's your choice. You can live in a world of shallow perceptions, or you can open your mind and realize that there's so much more to someone than what you see on the surface." The older man, visibly taken aback by Musk's response, stood there for a moment, speechless. His expression shifted from anger to confusion, as though he hadn't anticipated that level of introspection. Musk had hit him where it hurt the most: his assumptions, his ignorance, his need to label people based on their outward appearance. And yet, despite the man's momentary silence, the damage was done. The boutique was no longer a place of high-end transactions and polished displays. It had transformed into a battleground for ideologies, a stage for Musk's confrontational brand of truth. The customers who had been silently observing the exchange now began to murmur amongst themselves, some whispering in approval of Musk's sharp retort, while others seemed disturbed by the intensity of the confrontation. The energy in the room shifted, becoming more uncomfortable by the second. Olivia, caught in the crossfire, glanced nervously from Musk to the older man, unsure how to handle the situation. She had seen tense moments in the store before, but nothing quite like this. She wanted to intervene, to defuse the situation before it escalated further, but she wasn't sure if that was even possible. What could she say in a moment like this? The usual sales pitch, the calming words of reassurance, felt so inadequate. This wasn't about a transaction. This was about much bigger things: politics, perceptions, and the constant battle for control over the narrative. Just as the older man seemed ready to retort, another voice from the back of the boutique interrupted. It was a soft voice, but it cut through the tension like a knife. "Excuse me, sir, but perhaps we could all take a step back for a moment," said a woman's voice, calm and authoritative. She was a regular customer, someone who had visited the boutique countless times and had been privy to the undercurrent of wealth and power that ran through the place. She was used to high-stakes negotiations and tense moments, but this was different. She stepped forward, her presence commanding attention as she addressed the older man. "This is a place for conversation, not for conflict. If you don't like the hat, you're welcome to leave, but we don't tolerate that kind of hostility here. Everyone is entitled to their opinion, but no one is entitled to treat others with disrespect." The older man, though momentarily stunned by the woman's intervention, sneered. He wasn't used to being challenged, especially not in a place like this, where he believed his wealth and status gave him the power to dictate the terms. But the woman's words had struck a chord. Without another word, he turned on his heel and walked out of the boutique, muttering under his breath. The door chimed as it closed behind him, and for a moment, the room was silent once again. Olivia exhaled deeply, her body tense from the confrontation that had just unfolded. She glanced at Musk, who stood there, unfazed by the scene he had just caused. His expression hadn't changed. He wasn't angry, nor was he particularly pleased. He was just standing there, as if waiting for the next moment to unfold. The atmosphere in the boutique had shifted. The tension had been broken, but only just. The customers, who had been holding their breath throughout the exchange, slowly began to resume their browsing, though it was clear that they were still shaken by what had happened. It wasn't just about the watch anymore. It was about the spectacle, the performance, the clash of ideals that had played out in front of them. Olivia, still recovering from the emotional roller coaster of the moment, turned to Musk with a faint, awkward smile. "I'm sorry about that," she said, trying to regain her composure. "Let's get back to the watches. Is there anything else you'd like to see?" Musk, his gaze still distant, looked at her for a long moment. He seemed almost unfazed by the drama that had unfolded. "Yeah, let's get back to business," he said, his voice flat. But there was something behind his eyes, a flicker of something, almost as though he was savoring the chaos. Was it satisfaction, or just a sense of superiority? Olivia couldn't tell, but she couldn't help but wonder if he had expected this entire spectacle. After all, Musk thrived on controversy, on the attention that came with defying expectations and shaking things up. Was the red MAGA hat just another tool in his arsenal, a way to provoke, to disrupt, to challenge the norms? As they continued to browse the boutique, Musk's presence seemed to hang over the room like a shadow. Olivia, though relieved that the confrontation had ended, couldn't shake the feeling that she had just witnessed something far bigger than a simple transaction. The drama of it all, the clash of ideologies, the raw emotions, the uncomfortable truth about how easily a symbol could ignite a firestorm, lingered in the air. It wasn't just about the watches. It was about the stories people carried with them, the judgments they passed, and the way they responded to the unexpected. Musk eventually made a purchase, though the details of the transaction were a blur to Olivia, who was still processing the events that had just unfolded. The other customers, meanwhile, had quietly retreated to the corners of the store, their interest in the watches now eclipsed by the spectacle they had just witnessed. As Musk left the boutique, still wearing his red MAGA hat, the store's staff exchanged looks, their faces a mixture of confusion, relief, and a lingering sense of unease. What had just happened? What would this encounter mean for the store, for their reputation, for the way they handled high-profile clients in the future? It was a moment of reflection, a moment where the lines between business and politics had blurred, and where no one would ever look at the boutique or at Elon Musk the same way again.